Okay, so let's jump into it, man. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of where you're from, and why did you decide to enlist in the Air Force?
All right, so I'm originally from California.
Okay,
I enlisted back in 2005, coming up on 17 years this month, on
congratulations
the
on that.
29th to be exact.
Nearing 20.
Yeah, yeah. So I originally joined because I, out of high school, thought I had it all figured out. I tried going to college, it didn't work out. I was 21 years old. I was still living at home with my mom, working two part-time jobs, barely making any money, and I was like, this sucks. I can't do this. And so my mom was always pushing me to join the Air Force. Because my brother, he did Civil Air Patrol, never enlisted or even went in the military. My grandfather was in the Air Force, and so it was just kind of our thing, I guess. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna go talk to the recruiter. And I told him what I'd like to do is I'd like to work on airplanes. And he's like, whoa, cool your jets there. Take the ASVAB first. And I was like, all right, let me take the ASVAB. So I took it, and then he was like, well, good thing you want to work on airplanes because that's pretty much all you're qualified for. I was like, all right, let's do it.
Perfect. Part of my master
So
plan.
I, yeah, and so I went to basic training in November, and that was nice. That was an experience because instead of being really hot, it was cold in San Antonio. Was not expecting that. Just a kid who grew up in Southern California his whole life. And then I went to Shepherd Air Force Base and I learned how to do my job, learning how radar, radios, and stuff like that worked. And then I was lucky enough to get stationed out at Herbert Field, Florida for my first base.
Ah, beautiful. Nice.
And then I met my wife. We started our family. We have two daughters, but we only had our first one there. And then I got orders to work in England for 4 years. That was pretty cool. And then I had my second daughter there. And then I was at Davis Montham as my last assignment, and now I'm a recruiter.
Wow, that's awesome. So Hurlburt, see if I can say that right. And then over to
Yeah,
England. Were you over at Mildenhall or Lakenheath?
Lakenheath.
At Lakenheath. Okay, so I was at Lakenheath as
That's
well.
when I was with the helicopter unit there.
Nice,
But
outstanding.
back when you were in, it was probably the helicopter unit is probably in Iceland
Oh, got it. Yeah, in the Keflavik.
at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, over at Keflavik, and then they migrated from there to RAF Lakenheath, and then now that unit is no longer in England. They're now over in Aviano,
They keep moving them, man. So you
Italy.
enjoyed your time over in England?
I did. I'll be real. The weather is sucked.
Is it English
The
weather?
food sucked,
It wasn't bland at all, was it?
but that was awful. But it awarded me the opportunity to go to Germany, France, Belgium, Scotland, Austria, all that stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So you had your first kid in Florida, your second one in England, traveling with a
Yep.
newborn. I'm sure that was probably an experience of itself,
Yeah, that
right?
had some challenges.
And then what was the base after that?
Davis Montham in
Davis Monthan.
Tucson.
Gotcha. Outstanding, man. That's cool.
And I was with a Compass Call there, the C-130s there, and I love that. I love that assignment.
So you are currently in the 2 Alpha 2X1, which is okay. And we talked a little bit about this before we started recording, but it's the Special Warfare Forces Personnel Recovery, Integrated Communications, Navigation, Mission Systems. Wow. So you told me the shorthand of
Yeah,
that. What is it again?
Comm Nav,
Comm Nav. So what exactly
short
does
for
someone in Comm?
communication navigation.
So what does that mean?
All right, so I am on the flight line, what's called a specialist. So I am very specialized in a particular thing. Such for that would be like interphone, radios, radar, GPS, sensors, data links, and stuff like that.
That seems like a lot of a variety of systems you have to learn. So I assume you learn all that in tech school, or is it most of like like OJT on the job training?
Most of it's OJT.
Okay. So what when you go?
because not all the systems. I'm sorry for stepping on you.
No, no, no worries. So when
Because
you go
not
to
all
tech
the
school,
systems are the same on every airplane as it is on the other aircraft.
got it. So you have to learn the individual airframe
Yeah.
specific systems. So
Yes.
probably so tell me about the tech school. So what all do you generally learn in tech school? Because it seems like there would be a lot of OJT at each individual installation based off of the individual airframe. So even like something as simple as the intercom system seems like it'd be completely different for a helicopter as it would be for a C-130, right?
Yes. So, what tech school taught me was how to read a wiring diagram, how to use a multimeter, and how to troubleshoot stuff like that. That's part of it. And then the other parts of it was how a radio worked, the components of a radio, how radar theory works, and stuff like that, how to read tech manuals and stuff like that, and do inspections. And then once when you get to your first duty station, that's where you get really into it. Here's a really good example. The AC-130U model gunship, what I used to work on, had a satellite radio called ARC-231, and that was our means of communicating through satellites. But on the helicopters, they had ARC-210, so I had to learn how that radio worked when I went on the helicopters. I didn't get training on that specifically in tech school. I just got a general idea.
Just the main concepts, right, of working on radios in general. And then once you get to your installation,
Exactly.
you start doing your upgrade training and specific unit training and stuff, and start learning those individual.
Yes.
I'm actually a little bit flabbergasted. So I interviewed someone from the public affairs career field, and I was blown away by the amount of variety of things that they're trained on, and the responsibility that we bestow upon young people who are coming in the Air Force, and the amount of ask that we have for them, right? And you guys are no different than those other career fields, that you guys have so much more variety of things. I can imagine that is probably just an endless pit of learning.
Yeah, always learning, especially because those aircraft are always in some state of upgrade. In fact, there was a new system that we just acquired on Compass called the last C-130 worked on called, oh jeez, ADSB. That is like some new version of altitude
Okay.
system. It that's part of it. I can't really get into the thick of it, but it gets into a little bit of that. And so I had to go back to class and learn how to troubleshoot and how that system worked.
Oh, wow. So do they actually send you to training for those individualized systems or the more complex systems?
They typically, for that instance, they brought down representatives from Boeing to come down and teach us.
Got it. Okay. So they send out a mobile training team of some sort,
Yeah.
kind of get everyone educated on it. That's awesome. So when you get to your first base, what does the typical upgrade training look like? And then what responsibilities are associated with as you start progressing up in your skill level?
Okay, so my experience is a little bit different than what it is now because you remember we used to have the CDCs,
Yes.
the books where you had to learn. My career field doesn't currently have those right now,
Okay.
but they're coming. They're getting written right now.
So,
So
when you had
what-
them, how many volumes were there?
6.
Wow, 6 volumes.
Yeah, I still have them somewhere.
So you
So,
probably assume there's probably
that's
going to
a
be
big-
6 coming out as well. Either that, or they're going to start
About
pushing them
that,
all
yeah.
into one. It would be a giant telephone book.
So I would have these manuals, the CDCs, the career development courses. It was basically everything that you learned in tech school. And so you were to be studying those up when you're not actively like turning wrenches on the plane. Because you have to eventually take a test, a skill level test. But when there's jobs to be done on the aircraft, you put those away and then you get trained on the radio or whatever. So you have what is your TBA, your training business area, where it has all your tasks in there. And so you can read up on, be like, okay, I don't know how radar works for this particular airplane. I want to get training on it. So you get your trainer and you say, hey, can you train me on this radar? And he'll be like, all right. And he'll take you out to the plane, run it up, and quiz you on it. And then if the trainer feels comfortable enough in your skill level in it, he'll be like, all right, he'll sign you off on it. And so usually to be fully upgraded to a 5 level, it takes about a year.
Got it. So
And then
as
at
a
that
five
point,
level, are
you
you
can be
become
trusted to fix a plane on by yourself.
got it. So so is it like maybe at the 5 level you become kind of the trainer at that point, or is that more kind
Yes.
of okay? Got you. So now you're training other young people who are coming in,
Correct.
new to the career field, get them going, get them ready. So what is the 7 level process, and what kind of
So the
responsibilities
7 level,
associated with that?
that's what I am now. I'm a technical sergeant. I'm E6. So what I would do, like when I was in that role, I would be training those 5 levels to become better 5 levels, to be better troubleshooters. But I can also sign off certain conditions. It's called Red X qualified. If an airplane has a Red X condition, that aircraft can't fly because
Gotcha.
it's either has a very like a in-depth inspection needs to be done, or it's broken. And so the 5 level would go out there, and then he'd make the repair, and he'd sign off the corrective action, and then I go in behind him, and then I inspect his work to make sure it was done right, that there's no FOD, that the area's cleaned up, all the connectors are on there, all good and tight and that stuff. And then I sign the inspected by and clear that symbol out saying that this job was done correct, it is safe, and I'm certifying that it's good to go. So if something bad happens, that all comes down on me. So I'm going to make sure I'm going to be going through all that with a fine-tooth comb.
Wow, that's so. When I worked in the command post, we would always be listening to the maintenance channels and stuff, and they'd be talking about the red X's on the aircraft and stuff. So, what this career field? What would be a good someone who's thinking about going into maintenance? And they're like, yeah, let me throw that on my list as job opportunities. Who would be like a really good candidate for a career field like this?
Somebody who likes to take things apart and put them back together.
Tinkerers.
Yeah, like that was me. I was always taking things apart, putting them back together. I've always wanted to know how stuff work. You know, those people that are just kind of sitting around, just always wondering, like, hey, how does this particular thing work? So in my career field, I would say, like, if you're a nerd and you play Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering like I used to, you'd fit right in, but you also got to be thinking about the troubleshooting side. Or if you also like, engines, or just working on cars and be a good mechanic, because the crew chiefs, you can go and do that, or you can get into aerospace propulsion and find out how a jet engine works and tear it apart and put it back together. Or if you're looking for specific trade skill certifications, aircraft maintenance will set you up for that.
Oh, that's cool. So, talking on that, what kind of certifications can you get?
So you can get what's called your A&P license. That is your airframe and power plant license. It is a certification where you can go to school and you'll learn how to manipulate sheet metal and make structural repairs, how to tear apart an aircraft engine, put it all back together, generators and stuff like that. For avionics guys, for like me, you can get your Federal Communications certification. And I already got that. That was paid for by the Air Force. So I'm like already certified, so I can put that on my resume and become even that much more marketable to the civilian agencies when I can retire. Because I plan on going back into aviation when I retire.
Nice, outstanding. So on the outside, those certifications, they have a direct applicability to the civilian world?
Yes, they do. Because think of it this way, I already am certified. That's a certification that civilian industry doesn't have to pay for.
Okay. Wow, that's
And then I
actually
also
really
have
good.
17 years experience doing that particular job.
So
Or if I have a top secret clearance, they don't have to pay for that either.
hey, even better. What
Yeah.
what's the job opportunities like? Is it pretty marketable, or are you guys pretty a niche kind of community in the military and in the civilian world?
So for me, going back into aviation, if I want to get back into that, which I do, I'm set up to go work for like Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, BAE, Raytheon, L3, Sierra Nevada. So I could definitely, if I can use the skills that the Air Force taught me to stay in aviation, if I'm looking to do that. The same thing if you are a crew chief, a hydraulic specialist, or aerospace propulsion. You can continue to do that, or you can become an Air Force civilian and do the same stuff you're doing now, but still in the Air Force.
Yeah. But that's actually really cool. So I know there's like a lot of parents out there that are like, enlist in the Air Force, get a skill, and come out, you find yourself and you come out with a skill. So it sounds like there is a direct applicability to the civilian world. So I was in two career fields. One is the command post, 1 Charlie 3 X1, and then the crash fire rescue. Crash fire rescue had a direct applicability, right? It's firefighting. But for the command post, there's not too much direct applicability, and you don't come out with certifications, right? You're like probably 3 miles wide and about 3 inches deep in that career field. But it sounds like you guys are very much 3 miles deep and about 3 inches wide. So you got your direct specialist, like you said earlier.
Yeah. Actually, I got a funny story about that.
Okay.
So I was going to a gym and I bumped into a guy I used to work with. I was stationed with at Davis Monthan. He was another career field similar to mine called instrument flight control surfaces. He ultimately get medically discharged for I think for like diabetes or something like that. It's some weird thing.
Okay.
But that's not the point. But I ran into him like, "Hey man, what are you doing here? Like way away from Arizona and South Carolina from where you're from." And he said, "I'm working at Airbus, building airplanes, and I only was in the Air Force for less than 3 years, and I'm like set up."
Wow.
Because he's already deployed twice and has that experience.
Wow. So from your experience,
And he is just living his life there, and I'm just like, "Oh my God, this is great."
see, you're almost there. You're at 17 years, so you can see the
Yeah.
light at the end of the tunnel on the for that nice transition. You can grow out a nice good beard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what, in your opinion, are some of the pros and some of the cons of the career field? What is it that you really, really, really love about the career field? And then what are some of the things that are like, oh, gosh, I wish we didn't have that?
So the biggest pro that this is me, just what I loved was knowing that my efforts that fixing that problem made that plane airworthy again. And I love it. There was times when I was in a Bagram Air Base. That was my last deployment. This radar write-up just kept coming back because it was really hard for us to duplicate it on the ground when we were troubleshooting it. And then finally, when it went down for an HSC home station check, we had about 3 days of downtime. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna really get into this. And I found that one of these resistors was bad,
Hmm.
and so I had to change that out. And the radar problem never came back. And I was just like, oh, finally.
Solved it. So you see like that
And
direct
so,
result of the actions that you took, right?
yeah, that's the best part. And the con of it all is sometimes you might be working in a very tight space, or you might be working a 12-hour shift.
Okay.
You might work a weekend, or you might be outside when it's hot or cold or when it's raining. But there's also a lot of downtime with that career field as well, because if the planes land Alpha 1 or Code 1, depending on that status, that means the airplane, all it needs is just to be quick inspect and put fuel on it, and you're good to go. So there's no just maintenance to be done. We just kind of hang out in the ready room and watch TV or play cards. So there's an other side to that con there, where there is a lot of downtime.
Yeah. So it seems like that's the military in general, right? Across all the branches, it's like super, super slow or like pure chaos everyone's running around trying to get
Yeah.
things done right, because it's probably not one airplane probably doesn't, or one aircraft, helicopter, whatever, doesn't break, right? It's probably going to be followed by about 3 or 4 other ones.
Yeah. Yeah, that's about right. You'll have the one that's the workhorse, that's the champ, where you can be like, oh, I'm not worried about that one plane. This one's gonna land Alpha One every single time. And then you got the turd box over there where you're like, they're flying that one tomorrow.
It's going to be busy.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So you
I
always
know
have the one problem child.
So it seems like the cons in general, with the 12-hour shifts, tight spaces, you're going to be outside. It's going to be hot. There's going to be times you're miserable. That's like all your hands-on career fields, basically, right? Because like you're solely dependent on, like you said, the ups and downs of the aircraft, whether it's operational or not operational. It doesn't make a difference, whether it's 100 degrees outside or 15. That regardless, like it's ones and zeros, binary. It's either broken or it's fixed. If it's broken, you have a job to do. If it's fixed, you're good to go.
And you'll see the same pros and cons with any career field too.
Yeah.
There'll be times where if you're working an office job, or your boss be like, "Hey, I need this project done by tomorrow," and then you're like, "Now I got to work a 12-hour shift," or then you're like, "Oh, at least I'm taking my work home with me."
So
it's the same ugliness of a civilian job is the same on the military side.
Yeah, without a doubt, right? I'm more civilian than I am military now. The problem's everywhere, right? A job is a job. There's gonna be good and bad, and yeah, you just gotta be resilient in it, right?
Yeah. Oh, here's another pro. I totally forgot. I can't believe I forgot about this. The camaraderie and the friends that you'll make. Oh, it's great. All the jokes, like even like I was saying, when it's cold, miserable, hot, or whatever, you're out there with your boys and your girls, and you're like, "Well, this sucks out here, but we're all gonna go through this sucky situation together.
All in it together,
and we're gonna be a tighter group of people together." And that's one thing that I am actually really scared of when I retire, is that I'm gonna lose that connection with all my people.
Yeah, that's
And
a real thing, right? And you'll hear from other veterans that have gotten out, that we're always searching for that, right? Even as a civilian working in Department of Defense and with the different services, you're still an outsider, right? Because you're not wearing the uniform. So even if you're working in the environment you used to, there's something about wearing the uniform, and it's that camaraderie. It just can't be matched. It can't be matched anywhere. At least not that I've ever heard of. So that's actually a really, really good point, Drew, on the camaraderie. I imagine the maintenance career fields, I've always remembered them being extremely tight.
oh yeah.
And granted, and then you have like the camaraderie of the service as a whole, right? But I always remember the maintenance career fields. They were tight. So that's cool. What about misconceptions? Are there any misconceptions that like people who might be enlisting in the Air Force or even in other career fields that may not fully understand CommNav?
So a big misconception that just enlisting in the military is that, oh, you're dumb, you couldn't make it out as a civilian, so you're going to the military as the last resort. That is something I have seen, and honestly, it aggravates me because I've met some of the most intelligent people I've ever in the Air Force, and it's because they wanted to serve, or they can be like, hey, my family can't afford to send me to college, but the Air Force can.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna do this for 4 years. Or they might find themselves in a tight spot. So they're like, I made one poor life decision and here's a good reset.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Another misconception about my career field is that we're a bunch of nerds, but we are.
But it's semi-true.
It's pretty true.
Hey, it's good to be a nerd. Okay, so in closing, is there anything that you think that we might have missed that you'd want to talk about specifically with the 2 Alpha 2 AFSC?
Uh, no, I don't think there's anything that we missed other than, there are some more desirable duty locations
So, in your
like
opinion, if
Japan
you were going to
that
throw,
I wish I got instead of England.
let's say, in your personal opinion, then what would be some of those nicer duty locations that you would want to throw on your dream sheet if you got this career field?
Yeah, so obviously Herbert Field, number one.
Nice.
If you like fishing, like deep sea fishing, Herbert Field's the way to go, for real. If you like hunting and all that good stuff, I would try out Moody Air Force Base. That's in Georgia. If you like hiking, you got Davis Monthan, you got the canyons and all that there. There's also Cannon if you like also kind of like camping out in the desert and being kind of isolated from everybody. If you're looking to see what Italy and Japan is like, I would definitely put that on your assignment preference list. And what else? What other? Because I only can go to a handful of places. That's one. That's another. There's another con with my career field. I only can go to like 9 Air Force bases throughout the world. It's very specialized. So it's Herbert Field, Davis Monthan, Moody Air Force Base, Cannon, Kirtland, Aviano, Mildenhall, and Japan.
They sound like
I
they're
can't
pretty
go
good
very many
bases, though, to
places,
be
but
honest.
they are. Oh, and the travel. I'm always traveling about. So if you get matched my career field and you're like, man, I only can go to 9 places, it sucks. And it's like, well, since I've traveled all over Europe, but I've also been to Puerto Rico, Guam, Hawaii, Washington State, Columbus, Georgia, South Carolina. I was always gone. Las Vegas twice.
Yeah. What is the typical
That's what I.
like? How often would you actually deploy? I know it's kind of that's a really subjective question, right? And there's probably no real answer, but just in from
Yeah.
your experience in your career.
So I've deployed 5 times in my time being in the Air Force.
Okay, that's not bad at all.
No, it's not. It all depends on the manning of your shop. When I was at Herbert Field, we had like 70 bodies. So you will deploy, but not like every year. It might be once every 2 years, once every 3 years, because other people might be volunteering for these deployments.
Yeah, that's one
I've
of the
known people that
things.
have gone almost their entire career without deploying.
Yes, so that's one of the things I loved about the Air Force is that even in the height of enduring freedom and Iraqi freedom, that it was still very much a at least in my career field. I know there were some that were like tapped on demand, right? Because they were kind of tip of the spear stuff. But we were mostly all volunteer. That we were never really told. So to be away from your family and everything else, I was like chomping at the bit to go deploy, right? But I was also a young single airman back then. But with the family, right?
Did you go?
What's that?
Did you go? Did you deploy?
I did. Yeah, I was lucky enough to do it. Yep. So I was
Where?
deployed over in the Middle East in a location out there. Back then, when they were 3-month deployments, and we got extended. So that was enduring. That was in support of enduring freedom, and then we went into Iraq, and then they put a stop movement in the theater. So that 3 months got turned into 7 months over there. But that was living out of a tent with the Army. That was definitely a culture shock, but I grew so much from that time. You're talking about camaraderie, right? Is when you deploy, and those relationships are solidified. So I met some of my best friends to this day. Groomsmen in my wedding, groomsmen in his wedding, and it's just lifelong relationships. So if anyone is even on the fence about deploying or a fear of deploying, right, I would highly, highly recommend it. It's when you're like doing your job in the middle of it, right?
Yeah. None of that
Yeah,
extra stuff. It's just you're just doing exactly what it is,
exactly.
and
Yes,
that's why I loved going. And it's tax free. You get your whole paycheck.
even better. So it's even better if you enlist,
That's
you
yeah.
re-enlist, right? Is that still a thing? Re-enlist overseas?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's the
okay, yeah.
thing.
Yeah, you get your bonus. If you re-enlist at the right time in the right location, your bonus could be tax-free. So that's
Yep.
awesome. Okay, so in closing, just want to ask one general question. And I think you'll have some really good input because you're a recruiter, right? And you have so many people come through the gateway. So in picture this, your scenario, right? You had two daughters, correct, Drew?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So one of your daughters, she's a senior in high school, and she decides that she wants to enlist in the Air Force. What words of wisdom would you give her on how to be successful, and any kind of words of advice?
All right. So once when she makes it into the Air Force, I would find a senior NCO and ask them what steps they did to get to where they are now. Because obviously, to become a senior NCO, there are certain things that you have to do early on in your career that I
Mm-hmm.
did not do, that I'm probably never going to make master sergeant. But for a young airman coming in, I would definitely find a senior leader and just kind of shadow them and see what they're doing and try to pick their brain so you can start going that pathway if you want to make it a
Yeah.
career. If you're not looking to make it a career, see what certifications in your specific career field that the Air Force will pay for that will make you even more marketable on the outside. And then just because you don't score high enough on the ASVAB to get the job that you really wanted to, just think of it as, hey, I just scored a qualifying score to get in the Air Force. I can be in the Air Force and then cross train and do something else later. So it's not the end of the world that you didn't score high enough to get that computer job. You can do something else for a little bit and then later on get into that computer job.
Yep. All great advice. I would absolutely harp on the mentorship, 110%. It's always been, I've definitely had the benefit of having some really amazing leaders in my life that have kind of molded and shaped me. Um, and and to counter that as well, right, is that I was ready to receive that advice as well, right? So it's not just receiving it, but it's actually acting upon that advice.
Yes.
And if you can do that, just like you said, as early as you possibly can in your career to understand what it takes to be successful within your career field, within the Air Force in general, and that you have the end in mind, to start tapping into all those mentors that you possibly can. Be curious, right? Start asking some curious questions.
Absolutely. I would definitely
Yeah.
do that because I'm sure the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, that's Chief Bass right now. I'm
Yep.
sure she, as a young airman, probably in her recruiting office, saw who the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force was, and she's like, I want to do that. And
Hmm.
I'm sure she sought out that advice and started, seeing what she needed to do, and her efforts paid off.
Yeah. Yep. Just pepper it with a little bit of intentionality, and you'll be good to go, right?
Yeah.
That's cool. Drew, I really appreciate your time coming on the podcast, and talking to us about your career field and just your life in the Air Force. I'm super grateful for your service. I'm super excited about a possible transition down the road. After you hit 20, then you got the option to get out and move into the civilian world, and really focus on the family and your career and everything else, man. But thank you for your service, brother. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me.